Good afternoon. Welcome to the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council's program featuring our panel speaking on the topic of writing, democracy, and global threats to both. My name is Thais Winkelblack, and I'm an ICFRC board member and your host for today's program. We are deeply grateful for the longstanding support of our community, many of whom are with us here today. Your help has allowed our organization to grow and thrive for 40 years, hosting speaker programs with experts joining us in person and online from all over the world. As a small nonprofit, we exist because of the generosity of individuals like you. We also extend our heartfelt thanks to those joining us virtually or watching this program broadcast online or via City Channel 4. You are an integral part of our broad, interconnected community. I hope, if you haven't already, you will all consider making a financial contribution today. We've got QR codes you can scan on your phone that will link you for making a donation. And these free programs are only possible because of your support, so thank you. Finally, I want to thank our sponsors and community partners for their support. In particular today, we recognize the Iowa City Public Library for their partnership and for the refreshments served today. And a big thank you to the UI International Writing Program, the UI Center for Asian Pacific Studies, and Better Together 2030 for sponsoring this program and supporting the ICFRC's Democracy Series. This is Welcoming Week. We want to make sure that you know that that is the case across Johnson County. Today's program supports a nationwide effort from September 13th to 22nd to be a community that is welcoming and inclusive of refugees and immigrants, something ICFRC is very proud to be part of. More information about Welcoming Week can be found on the events page of welcomeicarea.org. The Democracy Series is something that we want to make sure that you're aware of. That is our Fall 2024 series beginning today, Democracy at a Crossroads, Perspectives and Insights at Home and Around the World. We're really excited about this incredibly important 7-part series. The first 6 will precede the November elections, and the final program will be 2 weeks after. Do check out for more information on one of the flyers in the room or at our website, icfrc.org. And now I'm going to call on our Executive Director, Peter Gerlach, for just a couple notes about democracy.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Thais. Part of what we're doing with this series is talking to regular Iowans, right? We have this incredibly consequential election coming up. And so we're asking 2 people at all of the programs preceding the election to answer 2 questions. Right? We're going to give them only 2 minutes to do that. We just want a snapshot of what Iowans are thinking about. And the first question is, what does democracy mean to you? The second is, why is it important in today's world? So today we're asking Sophia and Sunday to give us their thoughts as Iowans about the meaning of democracy for them. Sophia?
Hi everyone, my name is Sophia. I'm one of the interns here at Iowa City Foreign Relations Council. Democracy to me means community and lifting each other up and asking your neighbors, what can I do for you? I think that the impact that we have, not just as voters, but like in everyday lives, is very important. And also making sure that you are having informed decisions about who is representing you, taking the time to really research the causes, the policies, the impact that your leaders will have if they are elected, but also, again, just creating community and having those important conversations while they can be uncomfortable, but very necessary for especially this election right now. And the second question was, why is it important? I think that it affects us in every aspect of our lives, whether, I know a lot of people say, there's a lot of people that say like, don't get into politics, but like it affects our daily lives, whether you like it or not. Like, I think, again, it's just important to be informed, because while it may not affect you or a policy may not affect you, it will affect your neighbor. And so again, I just think being able to take care of your community members and create a strong connection here in Iowa City and abroad. Yeah, it's for me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sunday Goshit, and I'm a board member of the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council. What does democracy mean to me? I grew up and lived through 6 military dictatorships in Nigeria, and I can spend all the day talking to you about what that means. When we got to the point where we're having democratic elections, I think it was at that point we felt, okay, our voices are going to be heard. We are going to get to choose the kind of person we want to lead us, not a military dictatorship, because we went through a lot of sufferings. So democracy to me simply means the opportunity for people to select the people who should lead them. And that opportunity simply means that we can have a discussion. We can listen to people. We can hear what they want, what they claim they want to do for us. But also, more importantly, that if you have a very clean democratic process, then what happens is if those elected do not do what they say they would do, you can actually have a voice to call them. Now, what it really means to me is if democracy is not practiced properly, the way we define it, then we run into the trouble of having another form of dictatorship, this time around in civilian clothes. And that is what we really don't want. So it is very important for us as citizens to be able to listen to people, to know who they are, and also be able to take the right decisions in who we vote and who we choose to lead us, because that is very important. And I'll just add that democracy in the US is very important to the rest of the world, because for many reasons, the US leads in so many ways, whether we like it or not. So whatever happens in the United States affects the rest of the world. And that is why this election is very important.
Thank you, Sunday. Thank you, Sophia. I'll note real quick that on your tables, at each of the tables, we have information about the 7 programs that we are doing as a part of this democracy series. On the other side, we have a page about voting resources. As a part of this series, we strongly encourage people to get registered if you're not already, to learn about where you can vote and what the voting process is like this year. So please be informed, please be engaged, please vote. Thais, back to you.
Thank you. We'd now like to turn to our program today, Writing Democracy and Global Threats to Both. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Chris Merrill, many of you already know, and we are so glad to have him in our community. He has published 7 collections of poetry, including Watchfire, for which he received the 11 Younger Poets Award from the Academy of American Poets, many edited volumes and translations, and 6 books of nonfiction, among them Only the Nails Remain, Scenes from the Balkan Wars, Things of the Hidden God, Journey to the Holy Mountain, The Tree of the Doves, Ceremony, Expedition, War, and Self-Portrait with Dogwood. His writings have been translated into nearly 40 languages. His journalism appears widely. His honors include a Chevalier des Arts Lettres. I'm terrible at French, excuse me, from the French government, numerous translation awards and fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial and Ingram Merrill Foundations. As director of the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa since 2000, Merrill has conducted cultural diplomacy missions to more than 50 countries. He served on the U.S. National Commission for UNESCO from 2011 to 2018, and in April 2012, President Barack Obama appointed him to the National Council on the Humanities. Lyuba Yakimchuk, a poet, playwright, screenwriter, performance artist from Ukraine, is the author of poetry books Abrikasi Donbasi, Apricots of Donbass, 2015, and Yakhmada, Like Fashion, 2009, as well as the plays Wall and Schrodinger's Cat. She also wrote the screenplays for both the film Slova House, Unfinished Novel, 2021, and the documentary Slova House in 2017. Yakimchuk was a songwriter and spoken word artist on the album Ukrainian Songs of Love and Hate in 2022, co-author with Mary Burnley of the libretto for Musical Freedom Letters. Her writing has been translated into more than 20 languages, and many of us became familiar with her, particularly as she read her poetry as part of John Legend's performance during the 2022 Grammys. Her work has been covered by the New York Times, BBC, CBC, and CNN. Her participation is made possible by an anonymous gift to the Iowa Writers Program, International Writers Program. Tabish Khair, poet, fiction writer, journalist, academic, who's living in Denmark currently, was born and educated in the small town of Gaya in Bihar, India. As I note, while an Indian citizen, he now resides in Denmark, where he teaches in the Department of English at the University of Aarhus. His most recent novels are Just Another Jihadi Jane and The Body by the Shore from 2022. His first collection of short fiction is Namaste Trump and Other Stories, 2023. Oxford, probably a combination of words we never expected to hear. Oxford University Press will publish his new nonfiction book, Literature and Others Against Fundamentalism, in 2024. He participates courtesy of the Paul and Hualing Nia Engel Fund. So please join me in welcoming this amazing panel.
Thank you, Thais, and Peter, and Sophia, and Sunday. Wonderful introduction, and I'm eager to share the stage with my colleagues from the IWP. If, as Shelley argued in his defense of poetry, poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world, then it may be useful to explore how the laws they write, the social, political, and psychic terrain they map in open and traditional forms, may help us navigate the ceaselessly changing relationship between the public and private spheres in the global battle between autocratic forces and the promise of democracy. Poetry, Shelley continues, strengthens that faculty which is the organ of the moral nature of man, in the same manner as exercise strengthens a limb. How does poetry school the imagination? Indirectly, by means of an exquisite deployment of images and ideas, musical elements and rhetorical flourishes, inspiration and execution. Nor can anyone say without at least some trepidation why a certain effect works on the page, in the ear, and in the imagination, or doesn't. As Eliot reminds us in his 4 quartets, these are only hints and guesses, hints followed by guesses, and the rest is prayer, observance, discipline, thought, and action. So today we're talking about what the rest is, to a certain extent. We live in a time marked by what political scientists define as democratic backsliding. After a post-Cold War flurry of emerging democracies coming to the fore, the last 20 years have seen a dramatic falling off in the democratic process. I did not realize at the time I covered the wars of succession in the former Yugoslavia that I was witnessing the first consequential backlash to the idea of one man, one vote. Horrific wars, that is, that reshaped Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and the international community in fundamental ways. Nor did I fully understand that my later cultural diplomacy missions to Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, China, Russia, and Ukraine, soft power initiatives designed to enhance democratic processes, sometimes haphazardly spurred by hard power economic and military efforts, were at best stopgap measures and, at worst, the geopolitical version of applying lipstick to a pig, doomed efforts, that is. In the summer of 2008, when Cedar Rapids and Iowa City suffered the ravages of a 500-year flood, which destroyed the arts campus of the University of Iowa, we moved in less than 24 hours the inaugural session of Between the Lines, our summer creative writing camp for Arab-speaking and American high school students from Iowa City to Chicago. Included in that cohort of young writers were 2 Syrian women who had postponed for a year their final examinations so that they could work with the Lebanese novelist Iman Humayedin. One day at the University of Illinois, which had graciously offered us dormitories and meeting room spaces for our program, Iman and I conducted a conversation for the students' benefit. I asked her to talk about her novel, B is for Beirut, which concerns the 15-year-long civil war in her homeland, and how she and her 2 sons had survived. I lived in awe of her courage and literary prowess. I should note that not long before that session of Between the Lines, I had accompanied her to Tripoli in northern Lebanon to cover skirmishes in a Palestinian refugee camp between a splinter group of Islamic fundamentalists and the Lebanese army, which I wrote about in The Tree of the Doves, Ceremony, Expedition, War. And now she asked me how it felt after spending 10 years covering conflicts in distant places to experience a tragedy in my own backyard, a question that has become ever more pertinent in the wake of the January 6th insurrection and Donald Trump's promise to deport millions of immigrants and to denationalize millions of naturalized American citizens. The political unrest I had documented in many places abroad now defines my experience in the country of my birth. How to describe that? I look to writers and friends from abroad who have blazed the way, including my colleagues here from the International Writing Program, for inspiration and instruction. 2 final thoughts. Those 2 Syrian girls that I mentioned, when the Arab uprising came to Syria, they were 2 of the first to be abducted and have never been heard from since. So that civil war had a tangible effect on Iman and me and so many of the other students we had that year. And that very fall, we taught together for 3 days in Chicago to inner city high school students, creative writing workshops. And we knew on Election Day 2008 that it was going to be a momentous day. And so what we did was we gave the students an assignment. They were to go out and overhear 5 different conversations, take down a line or 2 from what they eavesdropped on, and then to note 5 different things. And of course, we know what happened then. Iowa was the place that brought us, where Barack Obama found his sea legs as a candidate, right? Only to vote 8 years later for Donald Trump, and then again in 2020. And we'll see where things end up in 2024, but I'm haunted by the experience of teaching those classes with Iman, trying to understand how a mechanism present in so many places abroad had now come to the United States. And as I asked her one day during that second set of workshops in Chicago, she said that when her kids wanted to go outside or wanted to go visit their cousins, she would say to them, tomorrow we will see. And I turned to her and I said, maybe we could make a little writing exercise out of that. Tomorrow we will see. And the reason they couldn't go out was because a war is on, right? So we asked all these inner city high school kids in Chicago to write Tomorrow We Will See, and because there is a war on, little knowing how things were going to change later that afternoon and then over the next 16 years, which is what lands us where we are right now. Thank you very much. Who wants to go next? You do.
Hello, everyone, and I'm really happy to be here. And I arrived to Iowa from Kyiv, and it was a pretty long way. It took almost 2 days to arrive here. And I'm really appreciate American support, and I'm talking about not only ammunition from Ukraine and also for Ukrainian refugees here. It's really feeling to be here. It's really warm, and I feel the support every day in Iowa. Talking about our topic today, during this amazing introduction, I asked yourself, what is democracy definition for me? And for me, democracy is a freedom that doesn't spoil the other people's freedom. And democracy also has its borders. And we shouldn't cross borders of democracy, of freedom, of people freedom as well. And talking about Ukrainian situation, talking about war in Ukraine, which Russia started in 2014. It was before full-scale invasion. The war in Ukraine shows and how an authoritarian country, states or regime can be dangerous not only to their neighboring country, not only for whole region, but also for global democracy. Because before invading Ukraine, Christopher already mentioned today Syria. Before invading Ukraine, Russia invaded as well Moldova, Georgia, Chechnya, and Syria. And right now, Russia every day kills lots of people in Ukraine. It's hundreds of people. And Russia deport our children without parents from occupied territories to Russia. And probably you already know about this international court warrant for Putin. But I need to mention that this war isn't Putin's war. This is Russian war, and it based on culture of every society, on culture, Russian culture, and on Ukrainian culture as well. And talking about Ukrainian culture, it's probably I need to say that Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian society is horizontal one. And we have really a deep democracy tradition. I'm talking about Cossack selection. I'm talking about Magdeburg laws and so on. Talking about Russia, I can I can also mention lecture by Timothy Snyder, historian, American professor of Yale University, which made this series of lecture the making of modern Ukraine, which emphasize this historical differences between Ukrainian and Russia. And I'm a writer, and my job is to work with emotions through language. And talking about language, I can give you an example from Russian language, from its Russian idiom, which can show you that Russian society, Russian culture is vertical. they have such kind of idiom, be without Tsar in your head. Tsar, it's kind of king, Russian king, yeah, you know, the Peter the Great and so on. Be without Tsar in your head, без царя в голове in Russian language. It means to be kind of crazy or fool person. So to be normal, you need to have this Tsar in your head. To be normal, you need to have this vertical structure in your head. This is a really huge difference between us. And talking about war, during this war, Russia destroyed. Has been destroying all the time, not only our military object in Ukraine, but also civil objects. I even not talking about like children hospital, which recently was destroyed in Kyiv, huge children cancer, which work with children with cancer. I'm talking also about universities, which Russia destroyed in Ukraine, talking about museums. Also, I can mention this huge printing house in Ukraine, in Kharkiv. The hugest printing house, Factor Druk, was destroyed in Kharkiv, and we published about 40% of Ukrainian books there. It was one of the biggest in Europe. Not only in Ukraine, one of the biggest in Europe printing house. And they did this before the hugest book fair in Ukraine, Arsenal Book Fair. Russia, targets our culture all the time, because culture shapes all the time. Culture is the thing which shapes our identity. Our identity is shaped by Ukrainian culture, and this is not very first time when Russia does this to us. Centuries before, it's like repeating situation all the time. Russia trying to destroy Ukrainian culture, and when we were colonized by Russia, Russia tried to forbid everything, to write in Ukrainian language, to print the book in Ukrainian books, and so on. Talking about Russia as a colonizer, I need to show you these differences between another colonizers, for instance, of Great Britain or France. Usually colonizer said people which conquered people that you will never be like us. Our colonizer, Russia, told us you will never be different. They call us, right now it's like common situation in Russia, Russian people call us Ukrainians small Russians, malorossi in Russian languages. There are huge or great Russians with great Russian culture, and there are small Russians, it's like Ukrainian, or they called us like spoiled Russians as well. This is like virus. Russians, which ceased to be like Russianist, I don't know how to this which stopped to be Russian, yeah. They have lots of plenty words for us, and they call us like this all the time. And also this word is a part of our languages, Russian language and Ukrainian language. That's why now in Ukraine lots of people refuse to speak Russian and switched from Russian into Ukrainian. I was born and raised in Russian-speaking family, and I switched into Ukrainian before the war was started in Ukraine. But right now we have lots of people who changed language and refuse to speak Russian because language also is a border. It's also a main part of our culture, which Russia wants to destroy in Ukraine with missiles. And last year's part of missiles debris fall in my garden, in my backyard. It was kinjal. It's like this, like my hand, this like half of my hand debris. And Russia did this all the time. And Russian people are really smart working with culture. They understand that culture is soft power, and then they use culture to continue work of army, to continue work of militaries. After tanks, Russian in Ukrainian in our cities under Russian occupation, they destroy. Usually, they destroy our books. They destroy our education. They destroy sign with sign on the roads and everything which is written in Ukrainian language. So I believe that this soft power can be, of course, it can be good power, but also it can be bad power, and we need to be aware on it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I just would note before we turn to Tabish that authoritarians often use the same playbook, right? You can burn down a library or a printing press, and you might begin that process by banning books. It's something that we know about in Iowa now. Tabish?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. It's a pleasure to be here. I thought of the topic, writing democracy and global threats to both. And I sort of thought I would focus on the global aspect of it. Because obviously I'm old enough to remember when the Berlin Wall fell. I'm old enough to remember the kind of euphoria that a lot of us who were young then felt. It looked like things would change for the better. I'm also old enough to remember how everything changed for the worse, largely from the 1990s, when strange kinds of autocratic rulers started coming to power. Not all of them were dictators. Some of them were dictators, like Sunday pointed out, military dictators, but a lot of them were also elected dictators. And I also remember how largely most of us who were in countries where we had some sort of working democracy looked away. Okay? We allowed them to prosper. Putin is a good example of someone who was allowed to prosper for a very long time before he went too far. So I asked myself, why did this happen? Why this is still happening? Why is the world full of countries where Putins and proto-Putins and quasi-Putins and would-be Putins are in power? And it's increasing. I mean, it's less evident in some of the more democratic spaces like in Europe, but even there, governments are taking a turn away from democracy towards more control, towards more autocratic injunctions and so on and so forth. And I thought back to a book I had written also for Oxford University Press called The New Xenophobia, where my main point was that xenophobia has changed from the 1990s onwards. And that's not what I'll go into, but the reason I had made that point was that I came to a realization that because democracy is about power, okay? Power to the people, okay? So it does negotiate with power. But the nature of power has changed in a big way from the 1990s onwards. So I'll start off by just reading out a very short extract by an economist from a book in 2005, and then I'll talk in more normal words about it, okay? But I need to read out this extract. I have lots of other extracts, but I'll just read out this one. He's talking about 2002. Goods and services transactions of world GDP represented 3% of the monetary and financial transactions conducted in 2002. Transactions concerning international trade amounted to hardly 2% of the foreign exchange transactions. Settlements of purchase and sale of shares and bonds in organized markets amounted to only 3.4% of all monetary settlements. It is transactions in hedging products designed to cover the operator's risks, which have literally exploded. The ratio between hedging operations on the one side and production and international trading on the other was 28:1 in 2002. A disproportion that has been constantly growing for about the last 20 years and which has never been witnessed in the entire history of capitalism. Okay. What this actually means in ordinary words is that much of money does not exist in terms of production, trade, services. It exists as numbers. Numbers that are playing with numbers. Okay? Now, and this has been growing. This is 2002. It's probably like 40 to 1 now. Okay? So what does that mean in the world? It means that much of money is circulating from one country to another as sheer number. And there's no control over that. Once in a while, some politicians talk of tariffs here and tariffs there, as one politician does in America right now. But that tariff, first of all, it's going to be paid by the people of that country, but that tariff would still be imposed only on that tip of the iceberg, trade and sales. The rest of the iceberg is not visible. I mean, there are people who, of course, traffic in this money, and there are politicians who need power and who need money to stay in power. In that situation, obviously, there's a strange nexus. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy theory. I'm saying there's a strange nexus where certain kind of politicians encourage certain kinds of businessmen, and certain kind of businessmen encourage certain kinds of politicians. It happens in country after country in different ways. In countries where there's a bit more democratic transparency, like in Denmark or America, maybe there's a bit more accountability. In countries where that accountability disappears, you have outright dictators coming to power. In other countries, there's this movement away from accountability, and so on and so forth. So that is the first point I wanted to make, that we really need to think about why it is happening everywhere. And for that, we need to think of how power flows. Things have changed, and we are not confronting that. That's number one. Number two, writing. I mean, writing, as I also argue in this book, for instance, is the only real antidote to any kind of fundamentalism. And by fundamentalism, I don't just mean religious fundamentalism. I mean all kinds of fundamentalism, including political fundamentalism, for instance, some extremist version of Marxism, or economic fundamentalism, some extremist version of capitalism. These are all fundamentalisms. They're fundamentalism because they take a certain way of looking at the world, even a certain text. Maybe it's a revealed text. Maybe it's Das Kapital. Maybe it's Adam Smith's work. It can be any text. And they say, this is the way you read this text. This is the only way. This is the only truth. Okay? And that's where they become fundamentalist. Now, this is something you cannot do in literature. Literature, by definition, reads things in a contextualized way, where you judge. You're always judging when you read a novel. But that judgment is contextualized, it's bound to change, and it does not end in maybe slicing off the head of that character or ripping him out of the book. Even when we see someone as a villain, we sort of understand the villainy. Okay? So I argue that the only way to prevent fundamentalism is to get people to read literature as literature, not just as sociology, history, politics, whatever, but literature as literature. And that connects to what is happening in terms of democracy. Because if you can read literature as literature, you automatically open up a space for other voices, for accountability, for self-analysis, and so on and so forth. And that is what democracy is finally. I mean, there are lots of things, and many good things were said by early on about what democracy means, and I'm very sure all of us have our own versions to it. But for me, one thing that democracy means most of all is that it's the only system of rule where you can correct mistakes again and again, and correct them cheaply. I mean, sometimes you have people in India who say, oh, India is too democratic, which is not true. India is too democratic. It would be nice if we had a strong leader. We need a strong leader who would tell us what to do. The problem with a strong leader, these people say, but if the leader is good, everything will be good. These democratic politicians, they are trafficking everywhere, and we don't trust them, and so on and so forth. The problem with a strong leader is, first of all, who knows how good he'll be, but let's suppose you get this perfect strong leader who's absolutely good. Okay? But once things go wrong from there, in order to remove that leader, you're going to have civil war, yeah, which is what lots of countries have. So for me, I think one aspect of democracy is just the ability to live with mistakes, the fact that human beings make mistakes. And we need to have a system where we can correct our own mistake, because I might be this powerful leader, but I might make a mistake. Okay? Or I might be a voter and I might make a mistake. And for me, again, those things cohere in accountability. And again, when you have writing, it helps you realize your vulnerability, your limits, your context, and so on and so forth. That is largely my position on it from a global perspective. Of course, I could say more specific things about India and Pakistan and all the rest, but from a global perspective, that's what I would say.
I love what you're saying here. Because it made me think about your countryman, Salman Rushdie, and after the Iranian supreme leader imposed the fatwa on him, among the many wonderful things he wrote during that period were essays on what the novel does and the proliferation of voices that can exist in a novel and how important that is for the schooling of the imagination. And just this week it was announced that his new book, Knife, a memoir about being stabbed on the stage at the Chautauqua Festival, has made the long list for the National Book Awards. It's just a way of saying what we imagine would be happening abroad is also happening within. And I also wanted to say, Lyuba, to the, you brought up Timothy Snyder, who has been such a heroic voice, I think, in this period. And some in this audience surely heard him give a lecture here just about 1.5 years ago, courtesy of international programs. And he was absolutely brilliant. His new book coming out this week is called On Freedom, and that seems to me to be a required reading for any literate adult in the US these days. So, Thijs. Yeah.
Well, thank you to all three of you for sharing your experiences, your thoughts, your ideas, your reflections. And of course, now's the even better part of our program where our audience members get an opportunity to ask questions. And so we have a microphone that's going to float around. Oh, I'll float the microphone around? Okay. Raise your hand if you have a question.
Can I just say something? I am hearing impaired. So if you ask me a question, I come up with an answer that has nothing to do with your question. Please just repeat it loudly, okay?
Hello, thank you all so much for this. My question is for Lyuba. Okay. Could you talk a little bit more about vertical and horizontal cultures?
Yeah, I'm talking about society. And by the way, Lyuba, or my whole name, means love. So you can just call me Love, it's okay also. Don't worry about names. I am talking about horizontal and vertical society. I'm talking about, first of all, about societies. I mean democracy or like authoritarian regime. And I mean that society in Ukraine is society which like works in democratic way. We had revolutions. When we had like puppet president, puppet of Russia, Yanukovych, we created Maidan, a revolution of dignity, to change situation. Because before this, we association with Europe was already agreed between Ukraine and Europe, and Yanukovych spoke it and said that nothing is gonna happen. And talking about vertical society, I'm talking about like authoritarian and also about society which create all the time in their history, they create tyrants. They create Stalin or Putin. It doesn't matter. Yeah. And even after Putin does, they will create another person who will invite Ukraine again. This is society in which your like boss is the main person in your life. Your boss, not your family, not your friends, only the boss is the only person which matters in your culture. And this is this is Russian culture. And this is also society which, this is normal situation for them. They live with this star in their heads. We are pretty close with Russians, unfortunately. It would be perfect if we had mountains between us or oceans, probably. I would be happy, but we didn't have it. And we know their a lot about them and their culture, their language, their literature, everything. I was taught in my school, I had only 2 Ukrainian language a week and 3 Russian language a week, and lots of Russian literature, more than Ukrainian, or no, it was like not so much foreign literature in that school. And we didn't have Ukrainian school in Donbas region. We had lots of people who speak Ukrainian language, especially in villages or small towns, but we didn't have school to learn Ukrainian language, for instance. And this is also influence of Russia during Soviet time on Ukraine, and even independence of Ukraine after Ukraine became independent from Soviet Union and Russia. We had the same, and we really aware about Russian culture and how this functionality, and we have lots of experience with them. So this is just from my experience. Thank you for your deep question.
Other questions for Lyuba, Tabish, Chris? Lyuba, I have one follow-up. You talked about, the systematic, attempt to eradicate culture, which I think, really resonates with those of us who've thought about and maybe experienced authoritarianism. How do you think the Ukrainian people are responding in terms of, you talked about people switching to Ukrainian as a reaction, right, as a resistance. Can you talk a little bit more about cultural resistance?
Surely, it's really amazing things because when after full-scale invasion, we use language for kind of test on checkpoints in Ukraine, because in Ukraine there are lots of Russian soldiers and spies and so on, and to check them we use one word. This is palyanytsa. It means like round bread, traditional round Ukrainian bread, and Russian-speaking Russians cannot say this word, but Ukrainian Russian-speaking people can say this word. Russians, like Russians from Russia, cannot say this word. All people, palyanytsa, all people in Ukraine can say this word. Even Russian-speaking Ukrainians can say this word, palyanytsa. Russian can say this in this way, like palyanytsa. They cannot like this soft, hard syllables. It's like not so easy for them, but in Ukraine it's really easy. And this was the very first test on checkpoints in Ukraine when Russians were inside the country. Now we deliberated already Kiev and Oblast. It was in 2022, but in the time where we were in dangers and Kiev was on siege, lots of Russians were around cities, Russian soldiers. It worked, and it was amazing things. Also, like Ukrainian language is changing all the time because of war, because such kind of catastrophe, such kind of events. And for instance, meaning of the word is changing all the time. It's not so easy to work with changing, with the shift in language. For instance, before full-scale invasion, like we had this word electricity, and like here in Iowa, we just takes it for granted. This is normal to have electricity. We didn't mention that we have it. But after full-scale invasion, we were asked to mask our windows from electricity, to hide our cities from Russian artillery. When Russians were nearby city, you need to like cover everything all at night. And electricity became something dangerous. Now, electricity became something dangerous. It's dangerous to have electricity at night. After Russia started to destroy electricity infrastructure in Ukraine, it was autumn 2022. Electricity, and we like, and even right now we have a lot of electricity outages, and we have lack of electricity in our systems, and Russia occupied our electricity plants or destroyed some of them. And now, like, electricity is something really valuable for us. I remember a call of my mom, and one day she said to me, "We have so much of electricity today, Lyuba." It was like something amazing, like a kind of miracle happened at that time. And also, talking about the role of culture, also a culture became a place, like a home, where we can hide or where we can have some good moments. I got a letter from Ukrainian officer, Ukrainian soldier, who defended Mariupol from Russians, who was in Azovstal plant. It's like really, really strong story, and strong probably everyone know about Mariupol and Azovstal. He was imprisoned by Russians, and after deliberation, he was changed into a Russian officer, and he came to Ukraine and wrote me a letter. When I was in Azovstal in Mariupol, I read your book. I found your book there. This book, Apricots of Donbass. And I bought it after this deliberation. Thank you. That was this story. And I met with him. I was really impressed with this story, because when you are a writer, you aren't a soldier. You can defend your country with weapon and so on. We have lots of writers in Ukraine who became soldiers, of course, but I'm not. And it means a lot for me. I had kind of depression the days when he wrote to me, and this was so powerful thing for me. And now I'm working on the book about his story during this time in Mariupol. And also, Ukrainian writers can gather a really huge audience in Ukraine. It can be like hundreds or thousands even of people. If we are talking about Serhiy Zhadan, he gathered 4,000 people for poetry reading. But he's like rock star in Ukraine. Poetry in wartime became more essential for people. Ukrainian, even like during this destruction and destroying of everything in Ukraine, Ukrainians buy more and more books. It's already during 2023 was published 75% more book title than it was before in previous year. It was published 100 more book copies than it was previous years. We have lots of refugees, lots of people left Ukraine, we get less and less money because we have huge inflation, but people buy more and more books in Ukraine. And poets and writers as well in Ukraine, we are kind of celebrities there. Our photos are published in Vogue and Elle magazines. Yeah, it's really kind of celebrities, kind of rock stars in Ukraine. It's different attitude to writers we have.
Wonderful, thank you. And somehow you circled to Tabish's sort of comments about, literature as resistance to fundamentalism. So thank you. Any other questions from our audience? Okay. Well, what a fantastic program. We really, really appreciate the three of you being here today. Just a reminder, if you enjoyed this free program and the refreshments provided, or the opportunity to connect around important international topics and in person with both in-person and virtual experts, don't forget to support our mission to help Iowans better understand international issues and foster global engagement. Thank you to the members of our community for your enduring support. And a reminder that this is ICFRC's second program. We had a film at Film Scene last Sunday as well in this Fall Democracy Series lineup. So that's on your table, also at the website, icfrc.org. Our next program, Monday at noon, right here in this location, will be Election Watch 2024 Journalistic Experience from the Global Stage. Join us for a compelling discussion featuring 4 of the 2024 World Press Institute international journalists as they share their experience covering elections in various political environments. The panel will explore the critical role of the media during tense electoral periods and how they navigate political pressures and the ethical challenges they encounter while reporting on elections worldwide. And unfortunately, I think many of us believe that that's information we need to kind of be prepared for and what's going to happen, as Chris pointed out, right? All coming back here and hitting here for those of us who call this home, very much real. So thank you. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you to our amazing panelists for sharing with us today. Bye-bye.